Microservices, right? It's like this magic word in tech. Everyone's buzzing about it.
Yeah.
We've all heard those stories. Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, all these huge companies, they basically scaled up using microservices.
Right.
But
Right.
is there more to the story? Like, what if it's not all sunshine and rainbows?
Yeah.
Today, we're doing this deep dive on an article that made me stop and think.
Okay.
And it's by a software engineer who's been working with microservices for, like, over a decade.
Wow.
So they've seen the good, the bad, everything. And they're saying, hold on, let's not get too excited about microservices.
Interesting.
They start by going back to 2012. Back then, they needed to scale their company, and they found this thing called the AKF scale cube.
Right.
Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard scale cube, I thought geometry class.
Right, of course. It's
Yeah,
a clap.
But luckily, we have you to explain it.
Yeah, so the AKF scale cube, it sounds more complicated than it is. Basically, it helps you picture how to scale a system. So imagine a cube, right? Each side shows a different way to scale. You can add servers, make your code better, or split your app into smaller pieces.
Got it. So that last part, splitting the app, that's where microservices come in.
Exactly. Instead of this giant app, you have lots of smaller ones all doing their own thing. And what's cool is that our article writer, they were doing this back in 2012 before it was even a big thing.
Wow. Real pioneers.
Right.
But now they're saying, be careful. They
Yeah.
give these examples of where microservices went wrong.
True.
Like real companies, real problems.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Their first story is about a startup that went a little crazy with the microservices.
Oh.
They had something like 350 different services, but only around 200 engineers. I mean, how do you even manage that? It's mind-blowing.
It's a great example of how microservices, while they can be flexible, need a lot of maintenance. This startup found out the hard way that if you just chase after microservices without thinking about the costs, you might actually slow your team down.
So it's about finding a balance, right?
Yeah.
You can't just keep making things smaller without looking at the big picture.
Yeah.
This next example they call death by a thousand cuts services. It's this company that took breaking things down too far. They kept dividing this one part of their application, a bounded context.
Right, right.
And by the way, listeners, if you're not a techie, a bounded context is basically a section of your app with a specific job. So they kept chopping up this area into tiny microservices. Making even small changes became a nightmare. And get this, their solution for having too many services was to add another service.
Oh, wow. You're kidding.
It's like putting out a fire with gasoline.
Right. It shows how easy it is to get caught up in the hype of a technology. We forget to stop and ask, what problem are we actually trying to solve here? Sometimes the best answer is the simplest one.
Exactly, the right tool for the job.
Right.
And speaking of choosing wisely, they talk about something that's super relevant now
Right.
with all the layoffs happening.
Oh, yeah.
Companies that went all in on microservices are finding it hard to adapt and cut costs. It's like trying to turn a giant ship really fast. It wasn't built for that.
Agility is so important, especially in tough times. Overly complex systems can be a problem when you need to move quickly.
For sure. It makes you think about startups that go all in on microservices right from the start. The article mentions one that focused so much on building all these services that they kind of forgot to build a real product.
Classic case of too many tools, not enough focus. It's easy to think that more technology equals more success, but really it's about solving problems for your users.
So true. Technology is just a tool, right? It's about what you do with it.
Exactly.
But here's what really got me. The article makes it clear these weren't bad engineers making mistakes. These were skilled people. So why does this keep happening with microservices?
Yeah, why?
Well, their idea is that there are bigger things at play here. They call them internalized microservices and the ZRP effect. Now, those sound a bit intimidating.
A little bit, yeah.
But don't worry, we'll break them down after a quick break. Okay, so internalized microservices and the ZRP effect. Those sound kind of sci-fi, to be honest. What do they actually mean?
Yeah, they're definitely interesting ideas. Internalized microservices is this idea that we're so used to using microservices in the industry that we don't even think about other options anymore. It's like our go-to solution, even when it's not the best fit.
It's like that saying, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly. And that's how we end up forcing microservices where they don't belong, just because we don't know any other way to solve the problem.
And then there's the ZRP effect. I had to look up ZRP. It's zero interest rate policy. What does that have to do with microservices?
It's all about what motivates people, right? So the article says that when interest rates are super low for a long time, like they have been, companies want to grow super fast. And that creates this pressure to use stuff like microservices because they're seen as the way to scale quickly, even if taking things slower would be better in the long run.
Ah, so it's like getting a loan for a fancy car when all you need is a reliable way to get to work. You might look good for a bit, but is it really the smart choice?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's about making decisions that are good for the long term, not just for right now.
All of this is making me think, are we just going to keep making the same mistakes with microservices?
Mm.
Is there hope for building systems that are both powerful and sustainable?
Yeah.
Thankfully, the article doesn't end on a totally negative note. There's good advice in there, too. Like, if you're already stuck with a system that's too complicated, they say you should try to simplify it, even if it means making tough decisions.
Sometimes simplifying things means changing how we think, too. Like, maybe we need to be okay with slightly lower reliability to make things more manageable.
Right.
It's about finding that balance, you know? Performance and scalability are important, but so are keeping things maintainable and being able to adapt quickly.
It's like cleaning out a really cluttered house.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to get rid of things you thought were important. It might not be perfectly minimalist, but at least you can live there comfortably.
Exactly.
And for teams just starting out with microservices, the advice is clear. Don't just follow the trend. Really think about why you're choosing them, look at other options, and get some outside opinions.
Be intentional, right? Make decisions based on your goals, not just because everyone else is doing it.
Which is pretty good advice for life in general, I think.
Definitely.
You know, the big takeaway for me from this whole article, it's this idea that technology is a means, not an end. And that just stuck with me. It's easy to get caught up in new tech, especially in software. But we have to remember why we're even building this stuff in the first place.
Right. It's not about chasing the latest and greatest or building the most complex system just because you can. It's about actually solving problems, making things better for the people who use what you build.
Yeah, like what are we really trying to achieve here? Are we optimizing for elegant code, fancy tech stacks, or are we trying to make a real difference?
That's the important question, and I think this deep dive gave us a lot to think about.
It definitely did.
Yeah.
So, to everyone listening, here's the takeaway. Microservices are powerful, but they're not a magic solution. Don't be afraid to question things, explore other options, and choose what works best for your situation, even if it's not the newest, shiniest thing. Sometimes the most practical solution is the best one.
Well said.
Until next time, everyone, happy building.